Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr. Speaker, I'm only going to take a brief call. I think by affirmation, at least I would argue most of the MPs in this House will support this legislation. It is an issue, I think, of priorities. I would make a couple of comments. I think Phil Goff referred to them, in that part of the reason that we have had, I think, at least to date, no loss of life, acknowledging that there is at least one, I think possibly two individuals who are still in a critical condition in Christchurch Hospital, is because of the building standards that we have maintained over time. And I just note in passing that there has been, some years ago, having been a former building and construction minister, there was quite a bit of criticism. And if you will, nanny statism, I think was one of the terms that was levelled at the level of scrutiny, the level of standard required, and in some respects, and quite rightly, the time it took to actually get a building up, get it completed. But I think it's interesting to note that those criticisms have dissipated, and quite rightly so now, because I think our building code has proved its worth and our building standards have proved their worth. And I note Minister Brownlee, or maybe Minister Carter's comments, acknowledging the fact that there is concern that we don't want the cowboys back in throwing up boxes willy-nilly and creating a further difficulty for us down the track, that the legislation, though it contemplates a fast-track procedure for a number of processes, there is acknowledgement from the government and also the opposition that we want it done properly. I want to also say that one of the biggest fears, I think, that is now starting to come out from the communities is the question as to whether people will be able to build on the land that they have built on now. I have to say that I think the local councils need to at least provide an intention, provide some direction. Obviously they can't be definitive because there are, I believe, 100 geotechs out on site testing land to see whether it is still suitable for construction, and the verdict, we have to wait for their verdict on that. But I personally believe a signal needs to be sent that it should be the intention and objective to allow people to build on their existing land, pending, of course... Sorry? Thank you. I don't think I was addressing you. I was talking about the local authorities, that people are looking for some direction, and I think it should be, it's my personal view, that it should be, as I was saying, Ms Wagner, the objective and the intention to allow people to build where they are now, pending, of course, geotechnical and engineering advice, because in some areas we don't know what's down there now. There may well be a void. I think it was Mr Carter who said to us in a briefing the only area we could avoid liquefaction was probably up his way, and we have lived with liquefaction. It is not a new concept, it is an old concept that we have lived with for many, many years. But I think people need to have some confidence restored. If you look at an example, say Pegasus Bay in my patch, a brand new town that's being built basically on sand, that the new technology and the higher standards, I think, that the Environment Court in its decision from memory required those developers to build to, then there is almost, I was there the other day, I think they lost a wine glass in the cafe and some jib was cracked and a few bottles of wine came out in the general store, but generally, at least on the surface, everything appears to be intact. And I would say to the people of Canterbury that if the technology that it has existed in recent years, which allows in places like the UAE, the Palm Islands to be built, where I've stood, where basically you're pouring sand into the sea and creating land and people can live there habitably, that I think people need to have a relative degree of confidence that they can return to the plot of land they have, pending, of course, issues around geotech and engineering. But I think that is a signal that the local authorities need to get out there. That does not bind them into a position, and I know they will not want to be bound into a position until they have the relevant technical advice, but it is a direction I think people in Canterbury are looking for. There is a lot of uncertainty, especially in areas around my way, coastal areas. We support this bill, and I reiterate Minister Carter's comments about the civil defence. I think it is impossible to train for every contingency, especially when you are dealing with a massive volunteer force. Many of the civil defence folks, of course, have just walked in, put on in many cases, without any training at all, because they've manned the food banks and other water stations and others, put on the yellow jacket and got into it. Many have had the benefit of training and coordinating activity. And yes, there have been some strains in respect of, and still are, in respect of people getting access through telephone lines to necessary resources. And I think, I say to the Minister of Civil Defence, I think that's something we need to continue to work on, to get people swifter access through the telephone lines to the relevant inspectors, the relevant people and the resources that they need. Because when that state of emergency is lifted, hopefully tomorrow noon, there will be again a degree of uncertainty created over the last week that, in my patch and others, the welfare post was where you went to get assistance, whether it be accommodation, trauma, food, water, etc. They will, I assume, be dissolved, and the business as usual agencies will then go and pick up that strain. I think that we need to make provision in coming days for things like ongoing and easy access to trauma counselling. That access has been very good, and people have been able to go and get it with ease. It would be difficult, I think, and a shame if people then had to revert to some sort of bureaucratic model, maybe through their GP or otherwise, to get that trauma counselling, which in many cases they do need. They may not even realise they need it now, but they will need it in coming days. I just simply reiterate the issues that we have raised previously, that I accept that these are wide-ranging powers. And I note the Green member who spoke, I think, neglected to say these are very, very strange times. This is a time when we do need swift action, but we do need to record for the record that there do need to be safeguards. It would be inappropriate if these powers went beyond the emergency recovery. We have assurances from ministers, and I take them at their word, that those powers will not be extended. I assume we will gain those same assurances from the commissioners yet to be appointed and other public figures like the mayors. But we will be, through the committee stage, raising some issues and asking for some feedback from ministers to provide on the record assurances that these powers are very wide-ranging, can be used very effectively, but should not be, it's probably the incorrect word to use, but should not be abused and used for surreptitious means at any level of government, whether they be central or local authorities. So I welcome the passage of this bill and support it.